How dealing with rude people? Why is it that the sharpest wounds often come not from knives, but from words? One cutting remark, one dismissive sigh, one arrogant tone can linger inside us far longer than we'd like to admit. Rudeness is like a splinter in the soul, small but capable of constant irritation if not removed. You've seen it in the supermarket line, the person rolling their eyes at the cashier, as if impatience grants them superiority. You've felt it in the workplace, the colleague who interrupts mid-sentence, their voice slicing through yours, as though their opinions were the only ones worth oxygen. You've experienced it in the smallest daily exchanges, the stranger who bumps past without an apology, as if invisible hands had crowned them with some divine right of way. And every time it happens, a question arises. How do I deal with this without losing my own peace? Do I match fire with fire? Do I walk away, swallowing the sting while they walk free with their pride intact? Or is there another way, a deeper, wiser, even transformative way to respond to rudeness without becoming rude myself? Dealing with rude people is not just a social skill, it is a test of character. Anyone can respond kindly to kindness, but to meet hostility with composure, disrespect with dignity, aggression with calm, that requires something greater than ordinary impulse. It requires self-command. It demands a philosophy of living that sees beyond the surface behavior and understands the machinery beneath it. Because here is the secret most people overlook. Rudeness is rarely about you. It is about the storm someone else is carrying within themselves. And when you understand that, the question shifts from "how dare they" to "how should I respond?" Let's dive into the art of dealing with rude people, not as passive victims, but as active participants in the shaping of our inner world. 4 ways, 4 lenses, 4 modes of response that, if practiced, can transform not just how you deal with others, but how you master yourself. 1. The art of silence. There is a peculiar power in silence, a kind of authority that speaks without words. When someone hurls rudeness your way, the instinct is to defend yourself, to shoot back, to slice the air with a sharper retort. But have you ever noticed how quickly such exchanges spiral? A sarcastic comment begets another, a raised voice calls forth an even higher one, and before long, the rudeness of one person has recruited you into their storm. Silence, on the other hand, is like refusing to step onto their battlefield. Imagine this. Someone snaps at you in a meeting, undermining your idea with unnecessary harshness. You feel the heat rise in your chest, that sharp sting of humiliation. The urge to retaliate burns. But instead of returning fire, you pause. You look at them calmly, perhaps even offer a slight nod, and say nothing. In that silence, the air thickens. They expected a duel. Instead, they find themselves swinging at shadows. Your refusal to respond becomes a mirror, forcing them to face their own conduct without distraction. This is not weakness, it is mastery. It is the difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is instinctual, it is giving your power away. Response is intentional, it is holding your power close, guarding it like treasure. Silence is not cowardice, it is a strategy, one that denies the rude person the fuel they need to keep burning. And more than that, silence protects your dignity, because at the end of the day, you cannot control their behavior, but you can always control your own. There is, of course, a danger in silence if it slips into passive resentment. That is not what I mean. Silence should not be a prison, it should be a weapon of choice. When wielded deliberately, it disarms without humiliation, it preserves without suppression, it communicates one profound truth. I will not allow your rudeness to dictate the rhythm of my soul. But silence, Why is it so difficult? Why does it feel in the moment like surrender? If someone throws their sharp words at you and you remain quiet, doesn't it almost seem like they've won? Like their rudeness was the final word in the exchange? That is the illusion, and it is only an illusion. Because the truth is this: the person who controls their tongue has already controlled the fight. Ask yourself, what happens to a rude person when you don't meet them at their level? Do they grow stronger, or do they fumble? The energy of rudeness is designed to provoke. It is bait dangling in front of you. Bite it, and you're hooked. Refuse it, and suddenly the bait is useless. Isn't that real power? To recognize the trap and not enter it. Of course, silence is not comfortable. It forces you to wrestle with your own pride. The silence is not really between you and the other person. It is between you and yourself. Can you withstand the sting without proving anything? Can you absorb the disrespect without making your worth dependent on their recognition? These are hard questions because pride screams for vindication. But here lies the essence of character. Do you define yourself by the noise of others, or by the steadiness of your own principles? Silence, then, is not absence. It is presence. It is not withdrawal, but command. By choosing not to react, you assert that your peace is too valuable to be tossed into the mud of petty conflict. And what is dignity if not this? Choosing calm over chaos, control over compulsion. 2. The mirror of understanding. Here is the uncomfortable truth. People are rarely rude for no reason. Behind the sharp tone and the dismissive words often lies exhaustion, insecurity, pain, or frustration they do not know how to express. When you learn to see rudeness as a symptom rather than a verdict, you step into a different kind of power, the power of understanding. Think about the angry driver who honks and yells as if the world is conspiring against him. Does his fury really have anything to do with you, or is it the residue of 100 unseen battles, a job he hates, a marriage falling apart, an inner life gnawed by anxiety? The truth is, we are all carrying invisible weights, and sometimes those weights spill out as rudeness. This does not excuse the behavior, but it explains it, and explanation breeds compassion, or at the very least perspective. What happens when you view a rude remark not as a dagger aimed at your dignity, but as a reflection of someone else's struggle? Suddenly, it is harder to take it personally. Their words become less of a verdict on your worth and more of a confession of their own unrest. This shift in perception does not remove the sting entirely, but it transforms how deeply it pierces. Of course, understanding someone does not mean tolerating every outburst. You are not required to be a doormat. But when you recognize that the rudeness is about them and not you, you reclaim your peace. You no longer feel compelled to retaliate because you know the fight was never truly with you in the first place. You become the adult in the room, the anchor in the storm, the one who refuses to let another's chaos invade your calm. There is an elegance in this approach, a quiet wisdom that sees beyond the surface of people. And it raises a question worth asking yourself: when I am rude, what storm am I hiding? That reflection alone can soften your response to the storms of others. But why should you bother to understand someone who is rude to you? Isn't that just giving them an excuse? Isn't it letting them off the hook? At first glance, yes. It feels like injustice. Why should you soften your heart when theirs is sharp? Yet, look deeper. What is the alternative? If you don't try to understand, what do you gain? You gain bitterness. You gain the heavy weight of taking everything personally. You gain a worldview where every rude act is a direct insult, and your peace is always at the mercy of other people's moods. Understanding, therefore, is not for them. It is for you. It is not an endorsement of their behavior, but a refusal to let their behavior define your emotions. If someone snaps at you, do you really believe their entire outburst is about you? Or is it more likely that you just became the closest target for frustrations they have carried for days? If that is the case, then why should you make yourself the center of their storm? This is not easy. The ego resists it. The ego says, no, it was personal. They disrespected me. They should know better. And maybe they should. But should they control your state of mind too? Should they have that much authority over your peace? Do you really want to outsource your inner calm to the unpredictable moods of strangers, colleagues, or even family? To understand is to separate yourself from the drama. It is to remind yourself their words are a reflection of them, not me. Their tone tells me about their heart, not my worth. Their sharpness reveals their struggles, not my identity. When you see rudeness this way, the sting softens, not because it didn't hurt, but because you refuse to wear it like a badge. And here's the paradox. The more you practice understanding, the less power rudeness has over you. It shrinks. What once felt like a direct assault begins to feel like background noise. And isn't that what freedom really is? Not the absence of conflict, but the absence of chains on your response. 3. The shield of boundaries. Now, let us not confuse understanding with unlimited tolerance. Compassion without boundaries is self-destruction, just as you would not walk barefoot across broken glass simply because you understand how it got there. You should not allow yourself to be cut repeatedly by someone's rudeness simply because you know it comes from their pain. This is where the shield of boundaries comes in. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors with locks. They do not isolate you from the world, but they determine what you allow to enter. When someone's rudeness becomes a pattern rather than a moment, when it turns into a way of being rather than a slip of frustration, it is your responsibility to decide how close you will allow them to your life. And here's the liberating truth. You do not owe everyone full access to you. Picture a colleague who belittles you daily, disguising cruelty as just joking. Picture a relative who drenches every family gathering with sarcasm and scorn. Picture a friend who uses rudeness as a mask for manipulation. In such cases, silence is not enough, and understanding alone is not protection. You must draw the line. That might mean addressing the behavior directly. I will not allow you to speak to me this way. Or it might mean creating distance, reducing your interactions, even walking away entirely. This is not cruelty. This is self-respect. Setting boundaries communicates a profound message. I value my peace too much to let your chaos consume it. The rude may see it as offense, but in truth, it is defense. Defense of your dignity, your mental health, your very humanity. What's ironic is that many rude people push precisely because they expect no one will push back. The moment you establish boundaries, the dynamic shifts. Some may resist, but others, surprisingly, may recalibrate, realizing that their behavior will no longer be tolerated. Either way, you win because you refuse to let their rudeness become the soundtrack of your life. But what if silence and understanding aren't enough? What if someone is not occasionally rude, but consistently so? What if their presence is not just sharp in moments, but corrosive over time? At what point does patience become self-betrayal? At what point does your willingness to endure become an invitation for them to continue? Boundaries force us to confront a difficult truth. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to us. That truth feels uncomfortable, especially if you've been raised to be accommodating, to always keep the peace. to always give people the benefit of the doubt. But let's be honest, peace at the expense of your dignity is not peace at all. It is quiet misery. Ask yourself, how many times have you tolerated rudeness from someone, telling yourself it's not worth the fight, only to find yourself seething later, replaying their words, building resentment that grows heavier by the day? That is the cost of boundarylessness. When you fail to protect your dignity, you pay the price in bitterness. So what is a boundary, really? It is simply a declaration. This is the line where I end and you begin. This is the space I guard because it contains my peace, my time, my self-respect. And what happens if you never draw that line? Then anyone, no matter how careless or cruel, can walk into your mental living room and dump their rudeness on the floor. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are clarity. They are not punishment, they are protection. And if someone finds your boundary offensive, ask yourself, why are they so invested in stepping past it? Why do they need access to disrespect you in order to feel close to you? That is not connection, that is exploitation. So you must decide, will you continue to endure constant rudeness, or will you risk the discomfort of drawing the line? Because one thing is certain, the rude rarely change until they encounter resistance. And sometimes your boundary is the very mirror that forces them to see themselves clearly for the first time. 4. The grace of humor. And then there is humor, the strangest and perhaps most beautiful weapon of all. Nothing unsettles rudeness quite like laughter, not the cruel laughter that ridicules, but the light-hearted humor that dissolves tension and exposes the absurdity of hostility. It is difficult for anger to survive in the presence of genuine amusement. Consider the person who snaps at you for no good reason. Instead of bristling, imagine you respond with a touch of wit. I see someone woke up with extra fire today. Should I get you a medal or a coffee? Said with a smile, such a remark doesn't escalate but disarms. Humor reframes the moment, shifting it from confrontation to play. The rude person suddenly finds their weapon turning into a toy. Humor is risky, of course. It requires timing, tone, and an instinct for the room. Done wrong, it can come across as sarcasm, which is just rudeness wearing a fancier coat. But done right, it is a kind of magic. It transforms sharpness into softness, hostility into humanity. It allows you to rise above the sting while keeping your dignity intact. The beauty of humor lies in what it communicates about you. It says, your rudeness is too small to touch me. I choose joy over bitterness, levity over hostility. That is power. The power not only to shield yourself, but to lift the atmosphere for everyone present. Humor. Why does it work? Why can laughter dismantle hostility better than reason, silence, or even stern correction at times? Perhaps because humor shifts the entire frame of interaction. Rudeness is heavy, humor is light. Rudeness thrives on seriousness. Humor punctures it with absurdity. But here is the crucial distinction. Real humor is not cruelty in disguise. It is not sarcasm that cuts deeper than the original insult. It is not mockery dressed as wit. Real humor lifts you above the tension. It says, your words cannot trap me because I refuse to play in the cage you've built. Ask yourself, have you ever laughed at something someone meant to offend you and watched their power dissolve instantly? That moment is revealing. It shows that offense only works if you agree to be offended. Humor is your refusal to agree. It is your declaration that life is too short to be dragged into every petty battle. But humor requires courage. It's easier to fight or flee than to laugh. To laugh in the face of rudeness is to expose yourself, to show that you are not shaken, that you see the absurdity of the exchange, that you are playing a different game altogether. And that unsettles the rude, because they cannot compete with someone who does not take them seriously. Isn't that the essence of dignity, not just to survive rudeness, but to transcend it? Not just to defend yourself, but to transform the moment into something lighter, freer, more human. Humor, when used well, does not humiliate. It liberates. It frees you from the cycle of escalation, and it frees the atmosphere from the weight of hostility. Closing reflection. So here we are, after silence, understanding, boundaries, and humor. 4 ways that are more than tactics. They are reflections of who you choose to be when others choose to be less. Because in the end, dealing with rude people is not really about them. It is about you. Do you let their words dictate your worth? Do you let their moods design your peace? Do you allow their storms to sweep away your calm? Or do you choose, deliberately, consciously, to remain the master of yourself, no matter how chaotic they become? Rudeness is inevitable. You cannot stop it from appearing, just as you cannot stop the wind from blowing. But you can decide whether you let it shake you. And in that decision lies the difference between being a victim of other people's tempers and being the sovereign of your own life. So next time you meet rudeness, pause. Remember, silence is strength, understanding is perspective, boundaries are self-respect, and humor is defiance. Choose wisely. Because the true test of character is not how you act when people are kind, but how you remain when they are not.